Let's listen in.
Of course, had virtually no construction going on last year in the city because of Pan Am, and this forced the postponement of a number of projects that simply had to be proceeded with. You sort of get it either way in this business, where if you don't replace water mains and they break, during summer or winter, people are upset quite rightly about that. If you do replace them, it causes some dislocation. But as you know, a lot of the projects that have caused a lot of the disruption downtown, and I'll make further reference to these as I report to you, are projects that are water main replacement projects, for example, and they cause a lot of disruption to the roads. And I can only say to the people of Toronto, I continue to work on this issue very hard personally. We are making progress, but it takes time, because whether you're replacing technology, whether you're altering the form of intersections, whether you are adjusting to the sharing of the road with other forms of active transportation, or whether you're coordinating events, these are all things that we're making progress on, and I'm confident of that, but it's a process that we have to keep at, and I'm determined to do it, because people tell me it's a continuing, very important issue that requires constant attention, and it has my constant attention, as evidenced even just by today's meeting. I wanted to just report to you on some of the things that we talked about today at the meeting, and the first one was that the project we initiated in June called TAP, which stands for Traffic Assistance Personnel, as you know, was to be a pilot project that ran in 2 installments, in the spring and in the fall. The pilot project did in fact run for 4 weeks in the spring, and had police officers deployed at 8 key intersections to help pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles move more efficiently and effectively around the roads and sidewalks. I'm pleased to report that when officers were present at these intersections, vehicles were able to clear the intersections faster, which meant cars spent significantly less time in the intersections, and pedestrians actually moved in a more orderly fashion. A lot of the task performed by the police officers ended up being to sort of manage pedestrians and cars together, because some of the intersections were areas of huge pedestrian movement, usually from transit. But the result of it was the pedestrians were safer, and the vehicles moved better, including vehicles which were turning, sometimes in these long lineups to turn. At some locations, like University in Front, where the volume of traffic is so high, officers have been instrumental in ensuring that pedestrians and cyclists and motorists share the road safely. And it meant everybody was safer, and that everybody kept moving better, because there was somebody there to kind of coordinate all the different moving parts. I think the police have not yet reached any conclusion, nor have the traffic people, with respect to the first installment. But I think they have been able to observe that proactive programs like this do work to curb the congestion that is plaguing the busiest intersections in the city, which were some of those to which these officers were sent. It underlines my own desire to have the province move as quickly as they can to pass the legislation that will allow us to deploy officers who are not police officers, but who are traffic assistance personnel, whatever they end up being called in Toronto, but they're a familiar sight in many other cities, and perform this role without occupying the time of highly trained police officers who, by and large, I think would be preferring to do something else. Phase 2 will start on October the 3rd, and will run from October the 3rd through to October the 28th. We will reintroduce the presence of police officers at 7 intersections across the city, and I say reintroduce because some of them are the same intersections. There have actually been very few changes. The one that has been eliminated from the list because it seems to be moving better now that the Gardner is open again is the Park Lawn and Lakeshore intersection, but they will be deployed again at University, York and Front and Simcoe, Bay and Bloor, Bay and Queen, Shepherd and Yonge, University and Adelaide, and the Bay Clearway Lane. So those will be things that will happen in that period of through the most of the month of October, which is the second phase of this, following which there will be a report prepared by the police and our traffic and transportation people, which we'll bring you up to date on at that time. I also wanted to bring you, and through you, the people of Toronto, up to date on the plans for the fall repair work. I'd shared these with you earlier on, but just to reiterate what's going to be going on this fall. The largest fall maintenance project, I think, or one of them, will be the full closure of the Gardner Expressway, which is necessitated this fall because there are many things to do, including resurfacing in the area where some of the previous construction took place on the west part, which has never been completed. And so it is most likely that the Gardner Expressway will be fully closed from Friday, October 21st to Monday, October 24th. And that involves as much acceleration of the work and as much overnight work during that whole time as they can. It's just, I wish I could report to people that we could do a partial closure for part of the weekend, but they need the whole weekend. Now, as luck would have it, and I guess this will involve a measure of good luck on another front, that weekend would be games 5 and 6 of the American League Championship taking place with any good luck at all at the Rogers Centre. If that's the case, we're studying now moving it to the rain date, because they always set a rain date for these weekends, which would be the following weekend. The following weekend would be some games of the World Series, which would be taking place in the National League Park, so that if we're there, and I'm still an optimist about these things, then it wouldn't be as consequential to have the Gardiner closed. So we will be working 24/7 to get all the work done to minimize future road closures, but they have barriers to remove, the temporary concrete barriers from the construction. They have a lot of paving to do, and the paving will be done 24/7 over the course of that weekend. On the good news side, the Don Valley Parkway will not have a fall closure this year, as I had indicated to you a couple of months ago. They got enough work done in the previous one to allow it to remain open. I should just say that we've had 85 projects that have been going on during this construction season. More than half of them have been on extended hours. 5 of them have been on 24-hour construction, and 8 of them have been on overnight construction. And so, again, I just hold this out as evidence to the people that we're serious about getting this work done at slightly increased cost, but trying to get it done faster. There have been a couple of instances in which, in consultation with the local councillor, we've chosen not to have extended hours because it was deemed that it would be unduly disruptive. And needless to say, that's led to some complaints from people about the construction proceeding slowly, but that just proves, I guess, that you can't win and that you have to do what you think is best in the context of all of these chores that we have to do. I should make two final comments. One, the work that is on some of the downtown streets people use a lot, like Richmond, Queen, and College. Well, College is actually a different story, but Richmond and Queen in particular, some of that work has been delayed a bit. What's going on there, I think, as you may know, is both road work and water main work. And the water main work has been delayed a little bit by some water testing issues, and they can't close the street and finish the road work until the water mains have been commissioned. And so, as a result, it's just delayed these things, but they expect to have that work done by the end of November, because those construction projects have been quite disruptive. And I guess I'll just tell people that we discussed some of the plans for next year, and that Dundas Street will be next summer's hotspot, because again, there's track replacement that has to be done, and there's water main work that has to be done, and these are assignments that simply have to be carried out. And the fact we're talking about it now, I hope, is an indication to people that we're trying to plan it in such a way as to have not have parallel streets all closed at the same time, and to be considerate in terms of when it all happens. Finally, and then I'm happy to take your questions on that or any other matter, I've asked for a set of data to be brought to my attention. I don't see very much data, and they're looking at huge quantities of data now because it's just more readily available from a number of sources, as you know. And so I've asked for a sort of fairly succinct summary of some data to be made available by the time of our next meeting, so that, again, we can share it with the public, to try to begin to measure on a kind of consistent basis several key traffic spots in the city, on arterial roads and otherwise, that we can then watch the trends. And I think, as you all know, when you look at this data, you have to take into account the fact that there can be weather, there can be accidents, there can be special events, there can be even things like light and darkness that affect how traffic moves. And so you can't look at it and say, well, it was faster one year to the next necessarily, but you can at least look if there's a trend line. And I think it's important the public should see this data now that I've started to look at it. And we've got lots of people helping us to sort of manage it with different apps and things they come up with. And so I've asked for a set of data to be brought forward to me by the time of our next meeting in a month, and we in turn would then start to make that available to you on a regular basis, so you can see as well what we're seeing in terms of how these challenges that are in front of us are evolving positively, hopefully, or not. So that's the report on that, and happy to answer questions on that or on any other matter that you wish.
On the traffic assistance program, you said that was being successful so far. Is there any kind of empirical evidence that we can attach to that, or is that just observation?
Well, I'm trying to get some data now so that we can do that, but with the data having the frailties that they do, because even comparing, Wednesday's data to Thursday's data on Richmond Street is good. You have to sort of have an asterisk beside it to say, was there an accident that day? Was it snowing? Was it dark? Was it light? I will only say this to you. You can't have retimed hundreds of signals across the city, which we've done since we began this process. You can't have taken the steps we've taken to better coordinate construction, as much as people still may think we don't do it. We're doing a lot more of that. You can't have literally moved events out of the downtown, to other parts of the city to try and alleviate this problem and say it hasn't made a difference. Now, it may have made a difference only insofar as saying things didn't get worse in a growing city with increased numbers of people and cars. But I think all of these things are definitely having some impact because, you, as I say, you just can't retime all the signals we've retimed. There are things left to be done, such as the deployment of people who will manage traffic on a consistent basis instead of having pilot projects, such as implementing the new technology that we're going to implement this fall. We've had some slowness on the procurement process, which I hope will continue to make a positive difference. But a lot of it, I will admit to you, is still anecdotal, partially because we haven't been looking at the data, which we're going to start to do quite rigorously now, and partly because even looking at the data doesn't necessarily tell you whether things are moving faster or slower, because you can't necessarily compare one day to the next precisely. So I would just say to you, my determination to try and address this remains absolute. I even reported to this committee on my helicopter ride that I had, and I said, look, I flew over one of the 10 hotspot intersections we had identified, and by the way, in the next month, I'll be giving you a report on exactly the steps that have been taken in those intersections. And based on the update that I've had, they've taken very tangible steps to reorganize the intersections, change signals, and do various things to help traffic move better and help pedestrians be safer. But I'll be reporting to you on that full set. But I went to look. I asked the helicopter to take me to Shepherd and Yonge, which is one of them, and I just reported to them on the fact there was a huge problem with people going westbound, turning left onto Yonge Street in the morning, and I wanted to know why that was, because people sitting in that would have been there for a long time, whereas the rest of the traffic was moving fine. I asked them to take me to see the Bloor Street bike lanes, and while I get reports in my office of times of the day when there are problems, when I saw it from the air that morning, the traffic was moving fine. And that's perhaps an indication, Ben, of the difficulty of looking at data. You know, when I saw it at 7:15 or 7:20 that morning, the traffic was moving fine, and yet I had people approach me when I was out for a walk on Sunday on Bloor Street and tell me there are other times of the day it's very congested. So I'm working hard on this, and so are a whole bunch of our officials, and we're going to continue to work hard on it because it's a serious economic and social and environmental problem in the city. But I think if we were doing nothing, things would be way worse. And that's not, to me, enough of a declaration of success, but I think we're on the right track.
Mayor Tory, on the RailDeckPark,
yes.
The item comes to Executive Committee on Thursday. The cost appears to be over $1 billion. This is an initial estimate. I'm wondering where it ranks in the long list of unfunded capital projects in terms of priorities. And, is it well down the list? Is it below the downtown relief line?
Well, the transit, I think, is probably the #1 priority in the city, transit and public transportation generally, but I don't want to start doing a ranking in front of you because, frankly, I haven't sort of sat there and tried to do that. I guess I would only say this to you. In terms of the quality of life that I feel myself responsible for trying to maintain and improve in this city, and my fellow councillors, that there are some pretty basic things we have to be able to say to people that they're going to have. And frankly, some of them they should have had years ago. And when you look at that long list, you can sort of you can try and assess accountability for that as you wish. I would say to you the reason that list is so long and the reason there are so many things on it is because people failed to make these investments in the past. The notion that we should have got to have the downtown of a major city where we had no trouble, when I say we, the previous city councils approving condo tower after office tower and did not make the arrangements to have proper public space for people who live there, to me is something you might be asking all the people who approved those projects. The notion that we had all those same projects built without proper public transportation, so that you have an area like Park Lawn and Lakeshore where you have all kinds of condo towers that were approved without accompanying public transportation, I actually wasn't here for that. What I'm setting about doing now is rectifying that in a business-like way, and I've told you that this fall I'll be bringing forward some measures that I propose, together with some of my colleagues, including Gary Crawford, to pay for them. And I would think that now people might want to look at the glass as approaching half full, in the sense that what we're going to do is proceed ahead with that long list of projects, including much needed parkland in the most parkland deficient part of the entire city, where the population is expected to double again in the next number of years based on projects that are on the books. and that we've got to get ahead with these. And so it's my challenge and the challenge of my colleagues to find ways to pay for all this, and to do as much of it as we possibly can. But I think the minute you start getting into, well, we'll do, the transit, but we won't do the parks, or we'll do the parks, but we won't do the transit, that's putting us at least halfway back into the mess that we got into in the first place by not doing this stuff when we should have as part of the task of running a livable city and building it out.
But isn't the challenge of this really trying to seek out priorities and spend the money in the most efficient way possible?
Yes, and I can tell you, I intend to set priorities, and I'm doing it, and I intend to spend the money in the most efficient way possible, which includes, by the way, the money that we spend presently. And I get a lot of heat about the fact we're asking people to take a look at